Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Heir's Lair. I'm your host, Jonathan Taylor. Today's video is going to be a little bit more unusual, or I shouldn't say today's video because I don't put out videos every day. This week's video, or simply this video, is going to be a little bit unusual when compared to my typical fare. It's going to be a lot more off the cuff, for example, but it does concern something that I've covered a few times so far over the course of my, over the course of this channel, namely historical fiction, and what the best way to, what the best way to put it together actually is. It's a topic I have some thoughts, some thoughts on, being a history enthusiast myself, and also given the fact that I have encountered historical fiction a lot of times over the course of, over the course of this channel's history. One of the first videos one of the first books I've ever reviewed, if not the very first book I've ever reviewed, was a book of historical fiction, and it also led to me arguing a little bit with the, with the author about, about her actual commitment to history or to historical realism. But that's a completely separate question. I'm not going to get into that. And the thing about writing historical fiction is that a lot of people tend to ignore the historical and just write fiction, and just think of the backdrop as just something that exists without going too deep into it, even though the environment of a story is significant in some way to it. But you can also go the other way, or rather you can go into the other extreme as well, where you focus too much on the history and not enough on the fiction, thereby leaving your story a little bit more constrained. So what's the best way to marry them? Well, I think the key to really writing effective and eye-catching historical fiction isn't isn't just assimilating as a isn't just learning or reading up on as much as possible, but you really need to apply your own level of understanding to what it is that you are reading. And in that sense, I think you need a method to to facilitate that understanding, to make it personal, because that is what you need in order to effectively write historical fiction. One that is, especially historical fiction, because historical fiction doesn't really need to be entirely realistic, but it does need to be often, it does need to be genuine, as in it, in the sense that it has to connect to your audience for, for whatever that looks like. And that is the idea behind this workshop as well, because and because I am going to delve into, because I want to show you how you can facilitate that level of connection by taking myself and my familial context and transposing it at various points in the past in order to explore the potential outcomes. And by familial context, I primarily mean me and my, me and my parents. That's what I'll be talking about all throughout this, all throughout this book. What would I be? What would I be like within the, within that environment, within these past situations, and what would my parents do in the, in those situations as well. I'm not going to go too far back because that already had. Because that would add way too many complications to this, to this specific workshop that I'm trying to put together. But before I go too deep into, before I start dipping into the past, I first need to establish the present context. So for the sake of purpose, or so for the sake of this video, what is my context? Well, I was born in Romania in 1992. Right during the time when when Romania had its liberalization shock therapy to overcome the the command economy model that was that was enforced before 1989. and that led to that led to rampant inflation. That led to a lot of a lot of people losing their job, a lot of people becoming homeless, etc., etc. So, it wasn't, but still there were some, there was some level of benefit to it, because through foreign investment there has been a little bit more, there has also been economic activity, and opportunities that opened up, and in general Romania's GDP kind of shot up quite significantly in the in the time since, to the point where it actually overtakes a lot of a lot of the countries that it would have been comparable to uh, back in 1989. So throughout the uh, 3.5 decades since, or more, uh, Romania has seen a substantial level of a substantial level of economic growth, and and in many ways an improvement of its standing. And it would have been within that level of improvement, within the level of opportunity, where where the roof was, where the ceiling was blown off in terms of in terms of not only economic opportunity but also most other kinds of opportunity, because because Romania also started opening its borders and connecting more to the world, that that I was born. Unfortunately, while the ceiling flew off, the floor also fell off, and as such there were many opportunities started to become started to come across. Not all opportunities were made equal. In fact, many of them were risks, and many of them could lead to unpleasant outcomes. Still, I was at least somewhat fortunate to have parents who were maybe not rich but well off. So even though we occasionally had to save every now and then for for this and for this and that, in general, if we really needed something, we could get it, and therefore I had a and therefore my childhood, I could say, was materially satisfying. What about my uh, and when it came to when it came to studying, I very much utilized the opportunities that were presented by by going to being able to go to a German university and become an engineer. I was also that is also aided by the fact that Romania joined the EU in while I was a teen. So anyway, I used that opportunity. Found out that I actually also have these other interests that I want to indulge when it comes to media making, be it videos or books, or rather be it be it within the audiovisual medium or the print medium, and that is what I've been doing. Not successfully, but satisfactorily, to the point where I can say I am I am happy with the activities that I am that I am delving into. Now, what about my parents? Well, my dad was born in 1966. My mom in 1967. They're part of the decree generation, aka the generation that was born after Decree 770, which banned all abortion and all contraception within Romania. It is it is the most numerous generation of Romania, and a lot of them are currently going into retirement, and therefore there's a lot of there are plenty of fears about how that will uh, about how that will affect the pension fund that that Romania set up. But anyway, but I'm not going to delve into that now. I want to talk about my parents. My dad, who is both of whom are engineers. My dad does like uh, energy engineering stuff, like so power plants and stuff. And my mom went into textile engineering. So that basically means gathering all the knowledge that is necessary in order to manufacture clothing. And after they graduated both in 1989. They actually got married in the same. They actually got married the same year, and also in 1989, the anti-Ceausescu revolution took place, and that at least for them opened up plenty of opportunities. More so more so for my father, I have to say, because he was able to because he was able to potentially get himself more directly connected to higher echelons of the energy branch, especially early on. But whereas my mom, while there was still textile manufacturing in Romania, the bulk of it moved to China. So she had to move. So she had to move from manufacturing to more of an administrative role. And yeah, nevertheless, she still went ahead and did that, and she did it well enough that I could have a materially satisfying childhood, and also they were able to support me while I was doing my studies. So to that end, I think it's fair to say that that you get a good understanding of what their conditions were and how it is that they've used them. Anyway, but now with that baseline established, let's go back into the past. Say 100 years. So I would be born in 1892. My dad would be born in 1866. My mom in 1867. Starting with my dad, I can pretty much say that he would not be an even if he is to be an engineer, which I very much believe he would. It would not necessarily be in the same field of like energy of power plants, because while electricity was was somewhat well known within the academia of 1866, it wasn't really something that was expanded well enough to where it would have an industrial basis that would also provide or offer an interesting career, something that he himself would also recognize as being particularly notable or necessary. However, given that the world's first electrical engineering college, university program or university level program was only made available, only started out in 1882, 1883, and funnily enough, it was in Darmstadt, where I currently live. That being said, there is another field that that does actually have does actually have both that level of novelty and that sufficiently strong industrial base that would allow him to that I imagine would be interesting for him to delve into, namely trains. He isn't really a big trains guy now, but he is very much interested in but he's still very much interested in planes and cars, and in the absence of those, let the ambulance through, people. Anyway, in the absence of of planes and cars, I imagine his interest the interest that he would otherwise devote to them would instead be taken up by trains. And I think he would very much recognize their their not necessarily their necessity, but their utility, which is perhaps the same, but anyway, that is something that, as I've said, he would he would notice, and that is something that he and because also because it is a somewhat more it would be a somewhat more prestigious somewhat more prestigious engineering school, and therefore it is something that he would be more that I imagine he would be more drawn towards. So therefore, I think my dad would have been a train engineer if he was if he was born 100 years earlier. Not necessarily not necessarily train conductor, but but otherwise involved within that within rail production or rail operation. With my mom, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because, well, in a time before feminism, obviously her career options would be somewhat limited. I think the first woman that ever went to a that ever went to a university level class uh, only actually went in 1892 in what was at the time the German Empire. I might be mistaken. And while I don't rule out her potentially making history and being the actual first woman to do so, uh, I'll keep this as a possibility and instead explore the more and instead explore options that I think would have been more readily available for her. Because while she also has some level of ambition, she still wants to work within the system, so to speak. I do very much imagine she would still go into the clothing or textile business, and funnily enough, this would be the 1880s when she would have when she would have been looking for future career prospects, because yes, she very much would be she very much would be working. She would not be I can quite confidently say she would not be a stay-at-home mother, or a stay-at-home wife, because she went in her 40s and did a PhD because the rest of her life bored her. So yeah, she is not one who to settle down. She is one to seek out challenges. That arguably makes the solution, the timeline in which she becomes the first woman to study at university level, a little bit more plausible. But personally, I think she would I still think she would try to work within the system, even if even if she's looking to improve her station. And to that end, given that Romania would be perhaps a little bit behind when compared to Western Europe, it would because Romania would be behind or rather was behind when compared to Western Europe in terms of in terms of certain aspects of economic development and industrial development. Romania around the 1880s would potentially be either fully within or right at the cusp of the of a broader industrial revolution, and as such, textile mills would have been all the rage. And I imagine she would be going into into this field, figuring out how to work these mills, these looms, and also potentially how to put some together how to put some together herself, and in such a way as to produce in such a way as to produce various articles of clothing. As for me, being born in 1892, with a country that was within a country that will have been unified within the past 15 years, because yeah, that's another thing that happened. That happened. Romania itself would have actually formed over the course of my parents' lifetime if they were born a century earlier. In the sense that the United Principalities would have been established within the first month of my dad's life, and then it would have gained its independence. Then those United Principalities would have gained their independence from the Ottoman Empire in 1878, and then they would have been proclaimed the Kingdom of Romania in 1881. So yeah, all of that. So all of that would happen within my, within my parents' generation. And I imagine through that, I imagine that through that they would, they could potentially feel themselves animated towards becoming, um, towards towards seeking to improve their stations, because now with this new position they have, Romania would have new connections, and therefore a new possibility would open up for them. As I already said, my dad in train engineering, and for my mom that would basically be, uh, that could potentially be construction of textile mills or textile looms. I would be born in 1892 in the in the middle of this potential shift in development, and I would basically be growing up within the within the milieu where where a lot of Romania's uh, best and most revered literature would have either emerged or would have been in broad circulation. But also, uh, its newfound independence would also, would allow it to independently find uh, connections and associations with other countries, or rather would allow Romanian citizens to seek associations with other countries. And as such, literacy goes up, and but also knowledge of new languages also goes up. And I imagine that is what I imagine I would do. I think I would excel, or rather, I would make myself more noticed within the field, within this field of languages. And I very much imagine that that would be the direction I would go down, being to the point where I basically become a foreign language teacher within my lifetime. I think German. I think German would be the foreign language that I would choose to teach. That being said, there is there is a pretty big elephant in the room when it comes to this particular starting date, namely the First World War. Now, Romania only started getting into the only got into war, into the First World War 2 years after it began in 1916. But still, it wasn't really a great situation for wasn't really a great situation for it. You can you can look it up if you really want to. But now, but if I were born 100 years earlier, how would I involve myself? Well, I have to say, I think I would very much support Romania going getting into the war. Not necessarily because I think war is glorious, or because I would think war is glorious or anything like that, but because, let's say, I recognize I think I would recognize some aspects of the necessity of war that would be that would be discussed. Something along the lines of maybe of bringing the whole nation together, or liberating Romanians who are Romanians from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, who find themselves uh, who don't find the same opportunities as as Romanians within the Kingdom of Romania would actually have. So, as I very much imagine I would be in on the war. I I also imagine I could potentially fight, or I would seek out I would seek out the opportunity to actually to also serve to also serve the war effort directly as a frontline commander. Whether I live through the war is kind of a toss up, but assuming I do, I think I think I would still be a teacher after the war, especially in a especially in the supposed 1926. But I do imagine I would potentially be more politically active. Keep in mind, I've been politically active, uh, in my current day as well, and and I very much see myself, doing that, potentially being drawn in, potentially being drawn, or considering, or feeling some level of admiration towards the Soviet Union, up until people like Rosa Luxemburg, or various or until I hear the news of Russian anarchists uh, being killed off by the Soviet Union, because I would be like, dude, what are you doing? These are the people who in the these because I would recognize that those particular acts are simply something that are simply a bad realization of uh, of an ultimately pretty good idea. And I would very much oppose and I would very much oppose that level of any kind of Soviet authoritarianism. Just as I would be an anti-fascist, because let's be clear, I very much would be. I imagine my experience in war would show me, would show me that the top brass pretty much thought of everyone who wasn't one of them to be expendable, and therefore I would very much try to avoid that level of uh, broad violence being inflicted upon the being inflicted upon broader populations, because my time in war would have really directly shown me, or would have afflicted me very much personally, with the with the realization of the consequences and the severity of war. And I would try to make sure that people no longer have that in the future. That could result in that could lead to me being being a liberal, but I do imagine being a traditional liberal, so to speak. But I do imagine anarchism being a somewhat more plausible alternative for me. And yeah, that would basically be me. 1926 if I were born in 1892. Anarchist teacher. Jumping back another 100 years, I would be born in 1792. My dad would be born in 1766. My mom would be born in 1767. I'm gonna start with my mom because from this point forward, or rather from this point backward, I think it's safe to say that her career is the easiest to, predict, because she would very much always be a seamstress or a tailor, or otherwise involved in the uh, in the construction of either textile material or clothing itself. So that is that is what she'll be doing. So that is very much what I always imagine her. She would be doing from this point forward, or from this point backwards. With my dad, that is a little bit more difficult, because I am not entirely familiar with the with the industrial capabilities of Romania within, or rather of what at the time would be the Principality of Moldavia within the late 1700s. I can say that the Principality of Moldavia, where my family has its roots from, would very much be would be under the uh, would be within the domain of the Ottoman Empire, even though it does act autonomously, it's still kind of its external policy is Ottoman policy, really. So, but internally, this time period, also known as the Fenergit time period, because a lot of the uh, because plenty of rulers were brought in, because plenty of rulers, or rather governors of the principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia, were brought in from the neighborhood of Fanat, as it was known in Romanian, but in the original Turkish is called Fener. For those of you who think it sounds like Fenerbahce, yes, that is the exact connection you should make. Anyway, so there is some level of there is some level of prosperity that comes through that, but that is more through clever governance than really external connection, and as such, it could be argued to have some limits. So, still, I imagine my dad would try to go into some level of more more complex manufacturing, which at the technological level of the 1780s would would either be could potentially be rail, could potentially be wagons, or I imagine weapons manufacturing would be the most plausible option. Making swords, making guns, making cannons. That yeah, I think that very much would that would very much speak to my dad, and it does somewhat neatly offer offer an interesting contrast between between my mom, who is doing this complex, elaborate, intricate, detailed work within the textile business, and my dad, who is doing this thing that has a lot of who could argue that has a lot of power behind it, but still requires a deceptive amount of but still requires of detailing and of intricate manufacturing. What would I be doing in 1792? Well, at that point, I do have to say, I think I know how I think. I know that I would very much be drawn to the uh, to the border of my my current understanding of my current experiences. So I would very much be looking at uh, what is at what is out there, and to that, and because that is very much, and because within this time that would very much be under the control or the domain of the Ottoman Empire. That is what I would be, that is what I would be looking into, trying to find out how to best connect myself within the, uh, within the Ottoman Empire structure. And because I have that in of my, my dad being a weapons manufacturer within this, system, I think I would go into the position of I would go in I would join the I would join the military in order to gain a better understanding of this of this broad system, and also it contrasts very neatly with my dad because he makes them, I use them, that kind of when it comes to weapons. So and anyway, with that being considered, what would my condition be in 1826? Well, assuming there aren't really any major, assuming there aren't really any major, there are actually a few, engagements of the time. There is at least one Russo-Turkish war that is fought over the, over the principalities, and also there is a revolution, or an attempt at an uprising that is carried out in 1821 by a historical namesake of mine, so to speak. So, but any, so I imagine I would potentially be caught up with that, and by and having to do revolt suppression as an officer of the Ottoman Empire. I don't know, I don't necessarily know how well I would distinguish myself. So I can't really say I would be, I would have made it to general by the time I was my current age. But I do imagine I would be at least at least somewhere in the pack. I don't think, I don't necessarily think I would have, I would have been killed in any, in any large scale engagement, though, though one can't really rule it out. But if I just say I'm dead, well, that doesn't really make for an interesting workshop now, does it? So instead, I'm just going to presume that I am indeed alive by 1826, when I'm a 34-year-old officer of the Ottoman Empire. But I imagine that after a while, I would potentially have some, I could potentially have some level of uh, allegiance, or or have some level of inspiration or consideration towards a Republican movement, because because another thing that you might have noticed that I didn't talk about, but which would absolutely have been an influence over the time, is Napoleon and his ascendancy. And if I were to go down the military route, on the route of a military officer, that is very much something that I would have considered. And when it comes to my career, and when it comes to who exactly I would want to emulate. But ultimately, I think I would recognize that there are some differences between what made Napoleon possible, and what made what I would be facing. So while I think he would be an interesting figure to emulate, or rather an interesting figure to um, or rather an interesting figure to adopt, in terms of how it is that he adapts his tactics, and how it is that he organizes his troops. That is ultimately something I don't think I personally will be particularly confronted by it, because because again, officer of the Ottoman Empire. I don't really have I don't really have any I don't think I would have any particular clashes with him, because keep in mind that that Napoleon's last battle, Waterloo, would have taken place when I was when I was 23, and at 23 I would definitely have been some kind of I definitely would have had some kind of junior officer posting, if I were lucky. So so yeah, so in that sense, in terms of emulation, Napoleon might not be interesting, but there is something else that happened with with Napoleon's movements, namely republicanism, and the Republican civil code, or rather the French civil code, and the opportunities that provides when it comes to stuff like freedom of expression, uh, freedom of conscience, freedom of enterprise. Why not? I think those would be points that I would find interesting, and these are points that I would that I could potentially try to either convince higher ups to adopt on their own, or it is something that I would independently seek out. And I'm currently thinking about the Spring of the Peoples, 1848, and the role I would have. Given that, but Howard, and given that at that point I would be a 56-year-old, I do very much imagine myself as a 56-year-old general, like uh, like being in, like contributing towards the towards the liberation of the of the remaining principalities, or at least of the Principality of Moldavia, from the yoke of Ottoman influence, and therefore being involved that way. But that's 22 years removed from the point in time where from the point of time that I am currently looking at. So, or rather, that I want to be talking about. So, yeah, that is. And so yeah, that is basically my position in 1826, officer of the Ottoman Empire, harboring Republican ideals. For 1692, again, my dad was born in 1666. My mom's born in 1667. She would be a seamstress, sailor, etc. My dad, I think he would just be a blacksmith from from this point backwards. 1692. My condition would be. I imagine the solution. I imagine the environment within. I imagine my my environment would be quite similar to what to what it had been in 1792. So I would probably still be an officer within the Ottoman Empire, and my dad could still be a could still be in the weapons manufacturing, and then going back there, really the major difference would be would potentially be around the time of would potentially be around the 15th century or earlier in the medieval period. But I've already been talking for like 40 minutes, and I think by this point you've gotten enough of an idea to figure out what it is that I've been meaning to share with you, and maybe hopefully have also come up with your your own ideas. So anyway, this is my suggestion for you, for how to workshop historical fiction. Think of placing yourself or someone within that environment, and consider what would develop from that. Also also look up what it is that you would what you would need to know in order to really most effectively convey that particular aspect of them. And yeah, that would be it. That is basically all I had for for this week's video. Thank you for your attention. If you've enjoyed this workshop, well then please like the video, maybe even share it wherever you think other people will also like the video. Sorry about that. If there is anything you'd like to add, either to the concept of this workshop or to my particular implementation of it, that is what the comment section is for. And if you want to see when my next video gets released, well then, please subscribe. And ideally also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. My books, the first of my own Heir to the Empire series, The Next Generation and the Path Not Taken, are available at various book retailers under their respective master links in the description down below. I pass my social media links, which I also suggest you check out should you choose to. And I am trying to give you more reasons to, to make that choice worth your while, because I'm trying to get that, my third book off the ground. So by the time you see this video, you might have some updates on that. I also have a second channel where you can hear me talking about whatever crosses my mind. It'll typically be on topics removed from the print medium. So if that sounds like it could be of interest to you, the link is right there. If however you want to hear more about my thoughts on the print medium, well then I suggest you stay on this channel, where you'll find, and go for my extensive backlog, where you'll find an embarrassment of riches when it comes to book reviews, but also videos on miscellaneous writing topics. This is only the second workshop I think that I've made, but I do also have other literary games of the kind over the course of throughout this channel, as well as various reimaginings or rewrites, and other writing advice videos. If none of what I've said sounds like it attracts your attention, then I suggest you go ahead and do whatever you want the rest of your day, because it is your day after all. And yeah, that was it from me. So until next time, I am Jonathan Taylor, and this has been the Heir's Lair.